solid food doesn't really take the shape of its container, or it's not being held and supported by the container, so it's not really becoming affected so much by the container. It has its own walls, and it's able to retain its heat for longer. And therefore, it doesn't really become affected so much whether or not it was transferred into a klisheni. See, in this picture, this is the pan that it was baked in. Now it's the klisheni. This is a serving tray. And then you have the plate. So even the piece of chicken or the baked potato that's sitting on your plate, that could be the kli shlishi. This strict opinion says that you're not allowed to put anything that you're not allowed to put inside of a pot of cholent. Okay? In other words, anything that's subject to becoming cooked on Shabbos is not allowed to go onto this piece of chicken, even though it's in a kli shlishi. That's the strict opinion. The lenient opinion says they don't recognize any difference between a solid food and a liquid food. Once it's transferred to a klisheni, you can put liquids and spices. Once it's transferred to a kli shlishi, you can put whatever you want. Okay? So we have here a machlokes. We have here a machlokes. It's already in the early poskim. Commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. They dispute this question. And generally, the way it's treated, the halacha, generally the way it's treated is like a machlokes. In other words, it's an unresolved machlokes. It's not that it's clear that we accept one opinion over the other. It's kind of divided down the middle. So we accept it as a machlokes, as a question. Maybe it has the ability to cook. Maybe this piece of chicken that's already transferred to the kli shlishi, maybe it has the ability to cook, maybe it doesn't. So what do we have to do in such a case? We have to be strict. Right? That's the general approach. That we have to avoid putting things that are subject to becoming on Shabbos onto the davar gush that's already in the kli shlishi. However, so some people just, before I say that, however, some people just take this chumrah of a davar gush very straightforward and be careful that if something's a solid food, as long as it's yatsi lettuce, you have to be careful that it cannot touch any other food that is subject to becoming cooked, which means any other food that was not yet cooked, a raw vegetable that might be on the plate, or even if it's already cooked but it's liquidy and it cooled down completely, is not allowed to come in contact with this davar gush. That's how some people accept it. Many poskim work with a certain famous response, a certain famous tshuva from Moshe Feinstein, who he explains that you could. The question is basically if you could put ketchup on a piece of chicken that's already in a kli shlishi. What's the issue surrounding the ketchup? Already ran through a cooking process. The whole ketchup was already cooked, but it's now cooled down completely. So therefore, generally the rule is that yesh b'shel achavishta, you're not allowed to reheat the ketchup. In other words, if I were to ask you, could you add ketchup to the pot of cholent that was removed from the fire? Let's say this is a pot of cholent for soup that's off the fire, but it's still yatsi lettuce. Could you add ketchup to this pot? What? Correct? Could you? No. Why not? Because it cooled down completely, so you're not allowed to reheat it. So it is subject to the halacha of bishul, yesh bishul achavishul in this type of a case. A davar lach that cooled down completely, reheating it is considered to be cooking. It's not allowed. So it would follow, seemingly, the same way you're not allowed to put it in the pot of cholent. According to the strict opinion, you're not allowed to put it on a piece of chicken, and we try to follow the strict opinion. Right? But the answer is not so simple. We don't accept the strict opinion. That's not the halacha. We never said that. All we said was that we're not sure, and therefore, since we're not sure, we have to be strict. That's a suffix, right? The rule of a suffix, right? That means a suffix. The rule of a suffix generally is, I came across this a few times, I think, that if we're dealing with an Issa D'Oraisa, if we're dealing with a Torah prohibition, then we have to be strict. But if we're dealing with an Issa D'Rabbanan, if we're dealing with a rabbinic prohibition, then the halacha is, there's a suffix, then you could take the lenient, you could accept the lenient, either the lenient opinion or the lenient side of the question. So the same thing would be over here. Since it's not a fact that this piece of chicken has the ability to cook, it's a machlokes if it has the ability to cook. So then the answer to that question would be, if we're talking about cooking on a d'oraisa, then you have to accept a stricter opinion. But when you're talking about something which cooking it is only a rabbinic prohibition, so then you could accept a lenient opinion and permit it. So if you have something which was never yet cooked, so then cooking it is a Torah prohibition, then you have to accept a strict opinion and make sure that it doesn't touch the piece of chicken. However, if you remember, if you remember, we said that there's at least one way of learning. Reheating a liquid that cooled is only a rabbinic prohibition. We said it's a machlokes. Some say it's only a rabbinic prohibition. So Ramesh Feinstein in this response assumes that that's the halacha, that reheating a fully cooked liquid that cooled is only a rabbinic prohibition. That being the case, the only thing you're not allowed to do with that ketchup is put it into a pot of cholent, which could certainly have the ability to cook it. But to put it onto the davar gush, which is a machlokes, it has the ability to cook it. In this regard, you have a right to accept a lenient opinion that the chicken does not have the ability to cook the ketchup.
Can cold water be added to a cup of hot water that just came from the urn? So the cup is a cliche, but the water's too hot, so you add a little bit of cold water. Is that one permitted?
As far as the ketchup is concerned, we can rely on the lenient opinion according to his understanding. Again, but this is all assuming. So his argument is clear. It makes a lot of sense, right? Mm-hmm. So It depends what we're talking about. When we say could you put something which is subject to becoming cooked on Shabbos on a davar gush, which is in a kli shlishi, the answer would be depends if cooking that item, if putting that thing in the kli rishon is an issur d'oraisa, then the answer is no, you're not allowed to put it on this piece of chicken. If putting it in the pot of soup is only an issur d'rabbanan, then the answer is yes, you would be allowed to put it on this piece of chicken. Because it doesn't for sure have the ability to cook, it's only a suffix it has the ability to cook, and therefore, with regards to things which are not previously cooked, in other words, that cooking them would be an issur d'oraisa, so you have to follow their strict opinion. Something which is fully cooked and cool, liquid which is fully cooked and cool, according to Reb Moshe, is only an issur d'rabbanan. He's accepting the minchas kain. Don't forget, this was a machlokes. If reheating the cool liquid is an issur d'oraisa or an issur d'rabbanan, he assumes that the halacha follows the lenient shita, the minchas kain, and he says based on that you can put the ketchup. But so that's understood. The question is now if we can accept the truth, if we can follow this reading. And what's the question? The logic is perfect. Okay, there's no question about that. This is an issur d'oraisa, this is an issur d'rabbanan. The only thing that's questionable is if it's actually an issur d'rabbanan. If warming up the ketchup is an issur, putting the ketchup in the pot of cholent is an issur d'rabbanan. That we said is a machlokes. So it would depend on what the Alter Rebbe paskins on that. Wasn't 100% clear if you recall what we said, but the simple reading from a number of places in the Alter Rebbe is that reheating the cooled liquid would be an issur d'oraisa. That being said, it would appear that it wouldn't be so simple for us to accept this tshuva. On the other hand, the Alter Rebbe doesn't even mention the strict opinion. He doesn't bring it down. Okay, all the places can bring it down. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, there doesn't appear a sif in Shulchan Aruch that says that when it comes to a davar gush, we have to treat it more strictly. There's a machlokes. He doesn't bring down this whole question. If you want to tell us that it's a stricter halacha, he would have to tell us. So he does bring it down somewhere, not in the actual Shulchan Aruch, in the pnim, not in the base text for the Shulchan Aruch. In a footnote, it's not really a footnote. It's more like it's called Kuntras Achron. It's the part where sometimes the Alter Rebbe gives like a pilpul to explain his rulings that he says inside the Shulchan Aruch. In one of those things, he discusses this opinion. He mentions it. So it would seem to be that that at least there's strong argument to be made that the Alter Rebbe does not accept this opinion with regards to Hilchos Shabbos. Okay, that a davar gush should have the ability to cook once it's transferred out of the kli rishon. So it comes out that according to the Alter Rebbe, we have other reasons to be lenient, not just by ketchup, by anything. So therefore, it would be according to many Rabbanan, it would be acceptable to rely on this tshuva from Moshe Feinstein regarding the ketchup, even according to the Alter Rebbe, because he might not agree with this point, but it could be that according to the Alter Rebbe, the whole question doesn't even begin. So, at least with regards to this, we would clearly have good reason, maybe not according to the Alter Rebbe, but according to other poskim, there'd be clearly good reason to be lenient. And even according to the Alter Rebbe, there may be other reasons to be lenient, because he doesn't, maybe the way he learns this opinion, it doesn't affect Hilchos Shabbos. It doesn't have the ability to cook once it's transferred out of the kli rishon. So therefore, in the end of the day, it would be justifiable, let's put it this way. I'm not saying there's no reason to be machmir. There is. It means if you assume that it's an issur d'oraisa, and you assume, meaning reheating the ketchup is issur d'oraisa, and you assume that there's a question regarding the davar gush, his ability to cook, so then you would have to be strict. But there's good reason, there's justifiable reason to be lenient, at least with regards to ketchup. And that would include anything that was already previously cooked, mustard, okay? The only thing that you would have to be careful about would be stuff that weren't yet cooked. Let's say you shouldn't come in contact if there's other things on the plate. Hot sauce was the same thing, was already cooked. Hot sauce, mustard, all these condiments that usually go on the meat are already previously cooked. You have to be careful, it shouldn't come in contact with something which was not yet cooked.
So it can be on a piece of lettuce just to make it nicer, even if it's gluten.
No, so that would be an example where you don't have this leniency, because the lettuce was never yet cooked.
Yes.
So you say cannot. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you said. I thought you said you can.
That was like because.
Right. So you can. So there we should be strict, because so things that are not previously cooked. And again, let's not forget that this whole discussion is only with the davar gush that's still yatzeh lettuce. It's very hot. If it's not so hot, then the discussion is over.
So is it okay to add cold water to a cup of hot water?
Let's. I'm going to discuss it after this. That's the next subject.
Oh,
That's the next topic in the according to the order that I go.
all right.
Okay, so the next thing that you would want to be able to put in on it, which would be, let's say, to put salt on it, right? So now, could salt go in the pot of soup? Why not?
Because we say it wasn't cooked before. It might have been, but it might
The
not
salt
be.
that we have is cooked before, right? So could that go in the pot of soup before? Could that go
I
in
don't
the pot
know.
of soup?
Is Himalayan sea salt, is that cooked?
There is a thing in the because
Does sea salt mean that it comes from the water from the sea? And it's
Well,
distilled?
it was used to be ocean water, but it got pushed up into the mountains and they mined it from the mountains.
Oh no, so that's not cooked.
Yeah, that's not, okay.
But let's work with the salt let's assume we're talking about salt that's already cooked. We said even that, is that allowed to go into the, so salt that's already cooked is still not allowed to go into the pot. What was the reason?
because it turns into water and.
Because it dissolves, right? Once it dissolves, you treat it like a liquid. And by liquids, you're not allowed to. In the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur, we quoted it, we read it was very strict. He said you should be careful, therefore, not to put the salt, even in a klisheni. Not only can't you put it in a klisheni, you're not supposed to even put it in a klisheni. You have to make a klishlishi to put the salt in. So comes Pesach. Actually, he was the Lavacher Pesach. He was a Rav. He was a Machutin with the Alter Rebbe. In other words, the family's married. His name was Nechemia of the Bravna. The sefer that he wrote was called the Divrei Nechemia. He writes in response to that salt, you don't have to be strict on it, but the whole chumrah of not putting in salt applies to putting it into like soup. But to sprinkle it on, let's say, a piece of chicken, he's discussing even a piece of chicken that's in a klirisha. That's what he's discussing. Okay, sprinkling it on the piece of chicken over here would not be an issue because it doesn't dissolve when it lands onto the chicken. First it heats up. Later, after it heats up, it already dissolves. But it doesn't dissolve right away and then become heated up as a liquid form. So therefore, that whole chumrah that the Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur, right, not to put the salt in the soup because it dissolves, doesn't apply when you're putting it onto a solid food. So it comes out that when it comes to salt, a solid food is even more lenient than a liquid. Because if it will be a liquid, you're not supposed to put the salt not even in the klisheni, right? But when it comes to salt, that the whole issue with it is that it's dissolving, again, unless it's the kind of salt that was never yet cooked. But we're talking about the kind of salt which was already cooked, and the whole issue is that it's dissolving. So he says, he brings a proof, whatever it is, but it's assuming physically that it's not dissolving right away, okay, until it warms up. And therefore, whereas by liquid, the liquid dissolves it right away, and then it can get heated up as a liquid. So he says that the whole chumrah that the Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur not to put salt, even in a klisheni, certainly not in a klirisha, but even in a klisheni, that doesn't apply to putting salt on a solid piece of food. So even if we don't accept that when it comes to a kli rishon, that we should actually sprinkle the salt while the food is still on the tray. Okay, so that's because if it did dissolve, so then it would be a kli rishon. It has the ability to cook for sure in a Torah, right? But once you transfer it over to a kli sheni, and certainly in a kli shlishi, for sure we could rely on this kula, on this leniency, that since the salt is not dissolving right away, we don't have to accept that same stringency that the Alter Rebbe is speaking about in the Siddur, because the whole thing is based on it dissolving, and on a solid piece it doesn't dissolve right away. So it comes out that we have a famous leniency when it comes to condiments, putting on ketchup, mustard, hot sauce, all these things. Sheter Moshe's leniency about the ketchup. And then you have putting salt. So you have this heter from the Divrei Nehemiah, which again, even if we don't accept it on a kli rishon, but to accept it on a kli sheni or a kli shlishi, which again is only questionable if it has the ability to cook. So therefore, certainly we should have the right to accept this when it comes to the davar gush once it's already transferred to the kli sheni or shlishi. So then we could do that as well. So we're left with a very limited chumrah. If you accept these, again, these are all legitimate. I'm not saying that there's no reason to be strict. Okay, simple reading. Just be machmer. Whatever you don't put in a kli rishon, you don't put on a piece of chicken. Period. Okay, there's some people that do that, but in the poskim, there are strong arguments to justify many of the things that we'd want to put. Okay, and if you want to make, let's say, a sandwich, let's say it would be a hot piece of meat, and you want to put it on a piece of bread and eat it together with bread. Again, so again, you have the same leniency as the ketchup. Well, oh, I'm sorry, that the question doesn't even begin. Sorry, because that's a dry food.
It's dry
So
and it's baked too, the bread.
Oh, so the issue is that it's baked. That's why you couldn't put it in the pot of challah. But putting it on the piece of meat, that's called cooking.
So it heats up the bread, but it wasn't.
But it's not a process of cooking after baking.
Yeah.
When you put it in liquid, then it would be called cooking. But if you just put it onto a piece of chicken, it's not going to be called cooking after baking. So that's certainly allowed without any question. And even the machmirim would allow that. There's no one who would prohibit that.
What if you put lettuce or tomatoes in the salad?
So that's the end of the chumrah. That's where the chumrah begins and ends, according to whatever we just discussed. In other words, if you put together the two basic justifications or leniencies, however you want to refer to it, of Moshe with the ketchup, which covers really ketchup, mustard, hot sauce, anything that's already cooked, all condiments, and then leniency of the Divrei Nehemiah about the salt, which is another common thing that usually you want to put in. So your chumrah, what you're left with is things that were never yet cooked. Be careful that it doesn't touch the salad if it's in the same plate. And if you want to put other spices besides for salt that weren't yet cooked, then it would apply, like pepper or garlic powder, whatever it is. To put other spices because those weren't yet cooked, that's where the chumrah would apply to. So they're just dry; they're not cooked. They're dry spices, or it doesn't matter if it's dried or it's just a vegetable that wasn't yet cooked. So that's where the chumrah would really apply to. But in many of the things that we like to put on, to the piece of chicken or the piece of meat, once it's already transferred, once it's in our plate, there's pretty much strong justification for many of the things that we like to put onto it. Okay?
So ketchup only on the kli shlishi? Yeah? On the ragush?
I think the heter of Moshe would apply even to a kli sheni. In other words, once it becomes not a day right. In other words, once it doesn't for sure have the ability to cook. But certainly it would apply once it's in a kli shlishi. I have to think of I think he says it even in a kli sheni, but there is logical reason to only rely on it in a kli shlishi. Okay, that's understood? Okay, so the next thing, and it ties in a little bit, so you'll see that relying on the same type of logic. We'll see.
Then salad, garlic powder, whatever. It shouldn't touch the chicken at all. Not even cliche.
Unless it cooled down.
Thank you.
This is called a cliche. Once the water fills up here, that's called a cliche. In other words, you have a cup of hot water. This stream of water is called cliche. An uninterrupted stream.
So is that, that's a reish. Rishon.
Where?
Kli reish. Thank you.
An uninterrupted stream. Uninterrupted in the sense that when it's landing on something, when the stream lands on the tea bag, let's say you just put a tea bag in an empty cup and you open up the spout and the water comes out. So, it's pouring onto something. So that stream that's still connected, by the time when it's landing on whatever uncooked food we're talking about, okay? The top of the stream is still connected to the Kli Rishon, called loy nifsak hakiluach, that the stream is uninterrupted. So that, it's a machlekes in the Rishonim if it has the ability to cook, but we accept the halacha that it has the ability to cook the surface of what it's landing on. Okay? It doesn't have the ability to cook through and through. Let's say it will be a carrot, okay? Wouldn't be able to cook the whole carrot, but it will cook only the surface, only the outer layer, the outer peel of the carrot. The outer surface. Now, why do we care? Let's say in kashrus, it's important, right? I pour hot milk onto a piece of chicken. I don't have to throw out the whole piece of chicken. I just take off the skin and I wash off the chicken, and the rest of the chicken's okay because it only cooked. It only got absorbed into the outer layer, which was the skin, right? That's kashrus. Shabbos, who cares if it's cooking through and through the out? You're not allowed to do it. I don't care if it cooks the outer surface of the tea leaves, or it's cooking the whole tea leaf through and through, both sides. What's the difference? You're not allowed to do it. This is enough of a reason that you're not allowed to do it. So why is this important when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos to make make note of the fact that it only cooks the outer surface? So there's two nafkaminas that result from this. Two important halachas. One is not so practical. I mean, not so common. It's practical, but it's not so common. And one is much more common. So, if I were to, if I have a baby bottle, for example, but something in there, some formula that was never yet cooked. Okay? And I want to warm it up so the baby could.
But it has been cooked. They cook it when they.
Let's say just for argument's sake. For argument's sake.
All right.
Even if there's something which was not yet cooked in there. All right. And I want to warm it up for the baby. So inserting it into the Kli Rishon is not an option because that has the ability to cook, right? Like immersing it into the taking off the cover and just sticking the bottle into the Kli Rishon, that's not an option, right? If I have a bucket and I fill up a bucket, like a klisheni, let's say, and I want to immerse the bottle inside of it, is that okay? So it depends. If it's liquid inside of there, then it's okay. Like if I just want to warm up milk or whatever it is, right? Any liquid. Oh, it has to be a natural liquid, right? It's water or milk or honey or. So then I could do it because a klisheni doesn't cook liquids, right? But let's say I don't have big enough. Let's say it's not an option. But let's say I don't have a bucket or something that I could use to fill up and soak the bottle inside of it. Would it be acceptable to pour the hot water onto the bottle and leave it there until it becomes hot, until the whatever is inside of it becomes hot? Or let's say the thing that's inside the bottle is not a natural liquid, kind of like a food that was like emulsified or whatever it is. It was pureed or whatever.
So puree is called.
It's not a natural liquid. It would be a davar lach. It would be liquid. It would be a wet thing that even if it was cooked, you're not allowed to reheat it. But it wouldn't be called a liquid that's allowed to go in a klisheni, right? So therefore, I wouldn't be allowed to put it in a klisheni. So my option would only be to put it underneath the spout and pour the water onto it. Why is that better? Because this only has the ability to cook the outer surface. And the outer surface in this example is the baby bottle. So it's not going to be able to cook what's inside. So even if it's going to heat up whatever's inside of the heat, just because you end up heating up the food doesn't prove that it's bishul. And I'll prove it to you. If I have a klisheni, I have a bucket of hot water. So what did we say? If I take a pitcher of oil or something and warm it up, is that allowed? That was the case in the Gemara. That's allowed. You're allowed to warm up liquids in a klisheni. Even if I leave it in for a long enough time and the oil gets hot, yatse lettuce, still, you didn't cook the oil, you just heated it up. Since it wasn't put in a klisheni doesn't have the ability to cook the oil. So just because, even if you end up heating it up, it doesn't prove that you automatically cooked it. If it's done in a klisheni, then it's being cooked. And the iri klisheni only has the ability to cook the surface, and in this example, the bottle is the surface. So even if you end up heating up the food that's inside the bottle, but that's not called cooking. So that would be allowed. Okay, so that's a very straightforward nafkamina from the fact that it only cooks the surface and it doesn't cook deeper than the surface. It's very simple, straightforward nafkamina. That if the surface is the bottle, so you don't have to worry that it's cooking inside what's inside the bottle.
Well, why can't you put the bottle in the klisheni?
No, you could do that. Most of the time you could do that.
Oh.
But let's say you don't have a pitcher, or let's say what's in the bottle is not a natural liquid. Only natural liquids could go into klisheni. So then you could do it into a klishlishi. You could warm it up in a klishlishi. But for whatever reason, I'm just saying this halacha. Maybe it's not the most practical way to do it. Honestly, it isn't.
Yeah.
But it's allowed. Okay? Fine.
What about tea bags?
No, so the tea bag's not, because when the stream lands on it, it's going to cook the surface of the tea leaves.
But I want to ask a question about when you have klishlishi, are you allowed to put a tea bag first and then the hot water from klishlishi?
Okay. We didn't get to that yet, but I can answer the question straight because it's just a one-word answer. So I can answer it even though we didn't get up to there. It doesn't make a difference. Irui miklisheni. This is the klisheni, right? If you're pouring this water onto the tea bag, that's called irui miklisheni, right? This is called irui miklisheni because it's coming out of the klisheni. This would be coming out of the klisheni. So irui miklisheni is the same as if you have a kli shlishi and you're putting the tea bag into the kli shlishi. You can do whatever you want. I usually do it this way because it works better. Okay? Fine.
The cup that you put under the stream of water, it's still cliche? You still call it cliche?
When it fills up with water,
Yeah.
that hot water that's in the cup is called a klisheni. Klisheni means putting something inside of it. During the klivishon is when the stream is landing on something. So, now, the other nafkamina, which is more broader, much more broader, is I have a cup of cold milk, let's say. Half a cup, whatever, 3/4 of a cup of cold milk. I want to warm it up a little bit. I want to add some hot water to it to make it warm. So you have to do a whole procedure of take some water, make it into a klisheni, and then add the milk into a klisheni. That's allowed, right? Because klisheni doesn't cook liquid, so I have to take the water, put it in a klisheni, and fill up a cup of hot water. That's a klisheni. Then I can add the milk into the hot water. Do I have to do it that way, or could I just add some hot water from the urn onto the milk? It will cook the outer surface, right? So when it's a liquid onto a liquid, we don't have to worry about the outer surface getting cooked because there's no surface. As soon as the water lands, it breaks the surface. It's not like this. When you're pouring the water onto the tea leaves, so it lands on the tea leaves, it cooks the surface of the leaf. But over here, where it's falling onto water, it just moves the water away. So there's no surface getting cooked. And therefore, in this example, let me make a little bit more space. When you want to add some hot water onto the cold milk or cold water, or whatever it is, that's fine. Because you don't have to worry that the water is going to cook the outer surface of the milk, because liquid and liquid, there's no real surface, they just mix together. This is in a case where the resulting mixture, once you added the hot water, you only added a little bit of hot water, and the resulting mixture is less than Yahtzee lettuce. That's Fahrenheit. Meaning you're only adding a little bit of hot water to warm up the milk. If you were going to add a lot of hot water, so this is permitted. This is allowed. Okay? If, however, you're going to add, you have a little bit of, you're going to add a lot of hot water, such that the resulting mixture is going to be more than Yahtzee lettuce. Understand the difference between the two cases? And again, the question is whether or not the water is allowed to go directly from the urn onto the cold milk. But there's two scenarios: when you're adding a little bit of hot water into a lot of cold milk, or a lot of hot water into a little bit of cold milk. In this case, it's a machlokes. Two opinions in the Rishonim. Some say it's allowed, some say it's not allowed. Some say it's allowed because of the same reason we said before. You only have to worry about cooking the surface, and by liquids and liquid, there's no surface. As there would be if the liquid would be poured on a solid. And others disagree that since the resulting mixture is going to become Yahtzee lettuce and it's coming from a kli rishon, so then it's called that it's considered to be cooking it. So those are the two opinions. And again, the halacha is somewhat unresolved. I can't really say in this case that it's really unresolved, but the Poskim say we should try to follow the strict opinion and be concerned for the stricter opinion. But here too, there's again a famous, I don't know if it's a tshuva, if it's a written tshuva, but it's a ruling from Moshe again, based almost on the same premise. That's why I left this still up. And it's really based on the same idea that since it's not that this halacha is that it has the ability to cook in this case. There's a machlokes. Some say it does, some say it doesn't. So therefore, we could take the same ruling that we said over here. It makes a difference if the cold liquid that's in this cup is liquid which was already previously cooked, like leftover water from the urn that was left in the cup and cooled down, or your leftover tea or something that cooled down, or water that's coming from the sink when you washed out the cup.
If you're using the same cup as the clearation, you just leave it there. You have to make sure that the cup is dry every time you use it.
Well, not according to our tradition, not according to this tshuva that we're about to say over.
But it's a very small amount of
Correct.
liquid.
So let's see. So in this case, that you want to add a lot of hot water to a little bit of cold water, Moshe says would depend if you're adding it into cold water, which is from the sink. You washed out the cup and there's a little bit of cold water left. That water was never yet cooked. So there, cooking that water is a Torah prohibition. So therefore you have to be strict. You have to follow the strict opinion. But if you have some leftover cooked water, let's say water from the urn that you didn't finish and it remained in the cup, and now it's cooled down completely. So re-cooking this water, according to Rabbi Feinstein, is only in the Seder Rabbanan, and therefore you can be lenient on the question. Follow lenient opinion. That's the ruling that he says. So. You understand the difference now? These two. That's the ruling of Rav Moshe. So again, over here we also have to ask ourselves the question: so would we have the right, since it's predicated on the assumption that reheating this water to cool down completely is only in a Seder Havana, and it would appear from the Alter Rebbe that reheating the water is in a Seder Raisa, so would we have a right to be lenient on this and accept this leniency? So the answer is yes. Why? For like a similar reason that we said over here. The Alter Rebbe does not accept the strict opinion in this case. He clearly paskins like the lenient opinion. So according to the Alter Rebbe, you're for sure allowed to pour the hot water onto, even in the case of the sink water that's left over, you're allowed to pour the hot water onto it. The Alter Rebbe rules in the Shulchan Aruch like the lenient opinion in this question. So the Alter Rebbe holds you're allowed to pour the hot water directly even on the sink water. So this that we're trying to avoid doing that is because we're trying to be concerned for other opinions. This not the way the Alter Rebbe rules in Shulchan Aruch. The Tzedek brings down that we should try to be concerned for the other opinions. So we're not being concerned for the Alter Rebbe's opinion. We're being concerned for other opinions. So if we're being concerned for other opinions, so for those opinions we could rely on the fact that reheating it's only Nisa D'Rabbanan. So we don't have to be concerned that according to the Alter Rebbe reheating is a Nisa D'Oraisa. The Alter Rebbe holds that even when it's a Nisa D'Oraisa you're allowed to do it. In Shulchan Aruch he holds that this is mutter. He doesn't hold that this is a question. He paskins in both cases it's mutter. So this that we're coming to be strict to begin with is only to be concerned for other opinions. So for other opinions, we could accept the assumption that reheating the water is an Issa D'Rabbanan, and therefore we could be lenient in that case. So we could also, what we're left with in the end is we could also accept this ruling in this case. So therefore, going back to your case, you have a cup. Before you want to fill it up with water from the urn, right, the klisheni that you want to use, do you have to make sure it's dry? The answer is depending on what was in there. If the water that's in there is because you just rinsed out the cup from the sink, then you should try to make it dry before you fill it up. However, if the water in there is water that came from the urn, because you used it once as a klisheni before, then you left it and it didn't dry out completely, so that water that's remaining in there originated from the urn. It was already cooked before, so that water is allowed, so that you don't have to make sure that it's going to be dry based on what we just said here. Okay? Make sense? Good. And we can rely on this.
Is there a difference if the cold is the first thing in the bottom or the hot thing?
No, if the hot is in the bottom, then it's called a klisheni. In other words, if you have a cup of hot water, means you filled up a cup of hot water. Now you want to add cold liquid to that. What's that called? That's called adding the liquid to a klisheni. That we already said before, that's allowed. That wasn't the machlokes. The machlokes was adding the hot water to the cold water directly from the urn. In the case where you're adding a lot of hot to a little bit of cold, that was the machlokes.
So we're not cooking the cold water that we add to our hot cup?
I'm sorry?
The top cup there that just says hot, that one. If we add a little bit of cold water, we're not cooking that water?
No. Liquids and spices are allowed to go in a klisheni. You don't need to make a klisheni for it. Okay. We said there's still a reason to do it, because in case it's very, very hot, there are certain opinions, but strictly speaking, you could add liquids and spices to a klisheni. Although it is simpler, you just make sure you always make a klisheni. Mm-hmm. Okay?
But, so you said the Dr. Rabbi would paskin that it's okay for
even in the case of the sink, yeah. He holds. So, but it doesn't, we shouldn't just straight ahead go and follow that because it's a machzedek rights. We should be concerned for the other opinions. So therefore, we are concerned for them. But we don't have to accept the Alter Rebbe's strict opinion with regard to the reheating the water from the urn. Because we're not trying to satisfy the Alter Rebbe's opinion in this case. We're only coming to satisfy other opinions. Because in the Alter Rebbe's opinion, you're anyway allowed to do it, even in the case of water from the sink. Mm-hmm. We're only to begin with coming to satisfy other opinions. So for those other opinions, we could assume that it's only D'Rabbanan. You understand? A lot of those, if we're coming to satisfy the Alter Rebbe's opinion, so we have to make sure that it's going to be permitted according to the Alter Rebbe. But according to the Alter Rebbe, it's for sure going to be permitted. Right? So therefore, we don't have to be concerned for in this application. We don't have to be concerned for the Alter Rebbe's opinion that reheating the water is an issa d'oraisa, because he holds that even in cases where it's an issa d'oraisa, the irui doesn't cook the water because it just mixes.